My first question is a little bit about your background and then how you got involved in Attack the Show and got hired as a regular cameraman on the studio.
I mean, I moved to LA in, I'm trying to remember the exact dates. I think it was September of 2007, and just to try freelance. And I started working at TV Guide Network. And then I met a girl at one of the TV Guide award shows who was like, I can get you into E-News. And I was like, cool. I was freelancing. I was trying to get as much work as I could. And during the E-News time, which was in Studio A of the old building, Attack of the Show was in Studio B. And so they asked me once, can you fill in if somebody's not there? Or if we add a handheld, you could do that. And I was like, yeah, of course, sure. And Attack, I didn't really know that much about the show, but it was such a cool show to work on. Like instantly, I loved it. It was fun, and like the crew had fun, and there was no pretentiousness to it. There was like a camaraderie almost, like you were in some kind of special club. And to see people like in the street that would say, oh my God, you work on the show. I love that show. I watch it all the time. Like that kind of stuff was it was really neat. And the guests they got, the segments they did, it was so original especially for somebody who moved from news and sports into entertainment. I was like, this is great. Like, it's just fun to do. But like, it was just such a cool thing that being the handheld guy, they really only added me for the big shows. So if they had a huge guest on, or if they had a big, spectacle of a pig catch or whatever it was, like I was on the show, which was really cool. So, it was almost like you were hired to do the greatest hits.
You were hired to do some of the greatest hits. And I want to hear from your perspective because your name did come up. You were there during the infamous Olivia jumping in the pie. Now, I wonder if you might recount the anecdote and the story of that day and your involvement and your relationship. You had a relationship with Kevin, and this the one thing that keeps coming up over and over again about Kevin is he just knew everybody. He knew everybody's name on set. He was one of the rare pieces of talent, and I'm not in this group, but he knew everybody. He knew everybody's name, and he was just so cool with the crew, on camera and off. But on camera, he would try to, fuck with you. But that's part of his job. But tell me about like that day. And were you on the set? Correct me if I'm wrong. Were you on the set when Cameron broke?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So start with tell us the story from your perspective. This is like, what you witnessed and what happened that day with the pie.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, my top 3 shows were the pie, the James Cameron destroying Drunkle Ted, and Tom Green destroying the robots with the sledgehammer. Like those 3 were awesome. But the pie was interesting because they made this giant pie. I guess it was a world record, or they were trying for that. And they were wearing maid outfits. Kevin himself wearing a maid outfit. And I was on the handheld, which if you watch that episode, you could see me darting in and out, which is cool because it's like I'm immortalized in it, I guess. But when Olivia first jumped in the pie, they had a little pad at the bottom so she didn't hurt herself. But she missed the pad or jumped past the pad, and her knees hit the concrete floor pretty much just through some pudding. And she was just doubled over in pain. And the way she had landed was kind of butt up, if you will. And Kevin just always directing on the fly. Like he was really good at directing on the fly, anything live or something like that. He's like, come here. You got to see this. And so I go around behind, and there's just, Olivia's butt up in the air, and he's just giggling. And in my headset, I'm getting from the director, like, no, you can't use that. You can't use that. And I'm like, but Kevin wants it. Like, what do I do? And, I didn't really, it wasn't that comfortable of a thing to sit there and shoot that, but it was funny because Kevin's like, no, do it. And the director's like, no, don't do it. And I'm like, and then I just bailed eventually. But like that kind of stuff about Kevin, I loved, like that he was so quick when he would see a situation unfold or just even in an interview, if something went sideways or it was unexpected, he was so good at like just steering the ship and the cameras and, you know, and all that starts with a good relationship with the cameras.
So your memory of these events is these were the three kind of remarkable things that happened that actually stand out as, you're right, the greatest hits. Walk me through the James Cameron day when he destroyed a beloved character from the show.
Well, he was, you know, everything you've heard about James Cameron, I guess, you know, he's hard to deal with and this, that, and the other. And he couldn't have been nicer. Like, he was just having a great time. He was saying how he loved the format of the show. This is like off the show from what I remember. But again, being the handhold on that, I was right next to beloved Drunkle Ted. And so he's swinging this chair, you know, 5 feet from me. But it was just, as a fan of Cameron, it was just really cool to be part of something that's silly, you know, that a guy that's taken so seriously, and he invents his own cameras and all this stuff. You know, he's been to the Titanic, but here he is on this little tiny Studio B stage with a folding chair going full WWE on a drunk mannequin. It was just like, this is the coolest thing in the world. Like, nobody gets to do this stuff. I mean, it doesn't, you know, it's not changing history, but it was just neat to be a part of something like that, where somebody with that big of a name could let his hair down and just, you know, have a good time.
It's funny because people still talk about that. Tell me the Tom Green story.
Yeah. So Tom Green, I think it was the 1000th episode. Maybe it was one. I feel like it was one of my earlier gigs on the show. He's swinging a massive sledgehammer at the old robots that were on the set. And the robots were cool. I was kind of bummed. I figured they could have sold those or something, but he, you know, Tom Green goes 100 miles an hour, and I was really close to him, and he was swinging this sledgehammer just without any idea who was around him. So it was kind of scary. He missed my knee at one point by like a foot, maybe like 6 to 12 inches, just on a full swing at the robot. I was just like, oh God. I mean, if he hits your knee, anybody hits you in the knee with a sledgehammer, it's going the other way. So, you know, I was like, oh, got to back up a little bit. But still, like, you know, the iconic pieces of the set, like those robots getting destroyed or whatever, it was like, I don't know, it was just neat to be a part of that. But again, the being that close to a sledgehammer to your knee, it's a little like, you know, dangerous.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you telling those stories, because now I can show the footage from those stories when you talk about it. What other, like, there was a vibe on the set that was definitely different. Like I'd done, and you all as well, you've worked on a bunch of different TV shows. Vibe can be different. On some TV shows, honestly, it can be stressful, right? There's definitely a tone. I never got that from Attack. If anything, it was kind of this like party that you were a part of. And it was like, and because they didn't really have much of a studio audience, you know, they brought in like, okay, let's bring down all the interns, the associate producers, and everyone. You have to clap. You have to clap at the beginning of the show. But it kind of lent this whole vibe, because it was like always the same people, and there was always that enthusiasm. And in a way, Kevin and Olivia were both kind of performing for the staff, right? Just trying to make them laugh, right? Can you talk about that vibe, and then what it was like to work with Kevin and Olivia, and maybe some of the other personalities?
Yeah, I mean, especially for somebody kind of new to the entertainment world, a lot of the shows that you work on are very, you know, they're just buttoned down. They're very professional. You can't mess up a shot, or you can't. There's a lot of rules to the entertainment game, and that show didn't have those rules. It was more of a family kind of setting. It was just everybody was having fun. Yeah, producers, APs, writers, they were all on the floor, which I thought was like an extraordinary way of doing things that I'd never seen before. Because if you know when the laughs are supposed to happen, why don't you lead the laughs? And they did in the background. They'd be like, you know, trying to get everybody to, oh, or whatever reactions they had. And you still don't see that today, which is remarkable to me, because there's a lot of times I work on shows where I'm like, am I supposed to laugh now? Because it's kind of funny, but you're not getting that reaction. And just to have those guys on the floor leading that, like, it made you laugh even louder because you knew you could. And that's just something I've never seen on another show. Even funnier shows, they just don't really have anybody there to kind of guide you in that process. I will say, like, working with Joan Rivers, also on E! The Fashion Police, she had her writer on the floor, and he would do that. He would, like, wave on the audience at certain times, like, come on, you know. And again, so if a comedy legend is doing that, then the Attack of the Show guys were doing the right thing. I'm trying to think where else to go with this.
Oh, yeah, no, these are good. Good. I mean, you're helping set up and fill in blanks I have in the story because you were there during those times. But did you ever work on any of the field pieces, like out, like, I mean, what I mean by that is like San Diego Comic-Con or some of the other places that the show traveled, like CES and whatnot?
Yeah, I got to work on CES in Vegas, and what was the other one? Well, I wrote it down. Okay.
Was it AVN? Did you work on the AVN stuff?
No, I wish I did. So yeah, I got to work on CES in Vegas. I got to work on E3 in LA. I did one field shoot with, I think it was with Corrado, the producer. And that was an adventure. It was for the, what's the show where the obstacle course, you got to compete the whole obstacle course.
Ninja Warrior?
It was for Ninja Warrior. And I think we shot like 4 hours of stuff for a 2-minute package.
Did you get a lot of B-roll? That's what I just need to.
We got way more B-roll than we probably needed, but it is what it is. And the package is really pretty good.
You know,
I'll tell you more about that. So CES was one of my favorite. Going to Vegas for that, getting paid to go to Vegas was awesome. And that was the first time I really got to see like how the cast, the hosts, dealt with the fans. And Olivia is one of those people that is she's a lightning rod for a lot of thoughts. And all I know from being on the set or on the scene for that stuff was she took hours of the day. Every break they got, she'd turn around and take pictures with the fans, or she'd sign autographs. She was very accessible to that group of people. And I think that is why, one of the big reasons why that show was so popular, because, you know, guys find her attractive, duh. And she would take the time just to meet as many people as she could, you know, and I always appreciated that about her. And, you know, I see her from time to time on sets or on shows or whatever, and she remembers who I am. And it's just nice that you're like, hey, what's up? Oh, good to see you, you know? And so for a girl who gets so much negative attention sometimes, all I can say from my experience is she was always easy to work with, and she always showed up and did the job.
I would say my experience working with her was the same. And one thing that struck me is when we went to San Diego Comic-Con, this is after she had quit, she still did like a meetup while she went down to San Diego Comic-Con. She was there for other reasons, but she went and just like did a fan meetup, which is, I just can't even think about, like, I guess the only other person you might be able to compare that to might be someone like a Kevin Smith, you know, like who will go out of his way to talk to fans. But I can't think of celebrities at the stature of like Olivia or a Kevin Smith that actually will go out of their way to, you know, not just meet up with the fans, but spend time with them. So she was unique in that regard. What about some of the other talent that you work with? Because we were all, I mean, you know, for myself, it was the best TV gig I ever had. And this was after like ones that I can't say the same. I can't say that they were the best other television networks that I had worked with. What about, you know, with some of the talent, I think maybe they didn't appreciate as much as like I did, like, oh my God, this is a very unique environment, unlike any kind. Can you speak to that and maybe talk about some of the other people like Allison Hayslip and whatnot?
Yeah, I think just kind of getting in when I did with Kevin and Olivia, like their chemistry was was flawless. Like they really got along together, and people would ask me, "Are they hooking up? Are they an item?" And I'm like, I stay out of that stuff. But that's a product of their chemistry. They worked well together. They played off of each other. Their timing was great. And when Kevin left, the dynamic of the show changed a little, because you take away that really good chemistry, and now it's like anything, a sports team or anything. When you bring in a new person, you got to figure each other out. And so I remember it just being like, when they weren't on the show together, it changed. It wasn't as funny, or it wasn't as unique, but it built, and it's hard to explain it. Like I love Allison Hayslip. I love, trying to think of who else. Well, Sarah Underwood was so much fun to work with. And then Chris Hardwick would come on for segments, and I worked with him on Talking Dead and a bunch of other stuff. And so, you see people around all the time, but it just didn't have that same kind of thing that it did with Kevin and Olivia.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that was the chemistry that just you could not, you couldn't replicate. What would you consider? Well, you maybe even kind of mentioned it, some of the best and worst moments on Attack of the Show. I think maybe you mentioned 3 of the best, but were there things because this is the other thing that kind of struck me about the show, having been there myself, was knowing like when things went well, they went well. And when things went bad, it kind of actually went well. And by that, like a busted bit, something doesn't work, something failed, like it went well in rehearsal, but didn't go well. Like, and those rehearsals were fun, the sort of like run throughs of everything. It's like, okay, you'll be here for camera and this, and, the opening block or whatever, like the A block, like, kind of, do you have like memories of anything that's not as memorable as the pie, but like, oh, that went badly, but Kevin kind of saved it with his sense of humor?
There's nothing I can really think of, because it generally went off well. Like I can't think of it. I mean, maybe like I'm always going to forget the name of the squirrel, the stunt squirrel, which I thought was hilarious. But do you remember the name?
What's so funny is, off the top of my head, I don't.
I know, it's killing me.
It's killing.
It was like Joey Chitwood. It was the guy in New England at the time, but it was something like that. Anyway, but like I just remember that, the car failing or flipping over the edge or not working, and like again, it took a guy like Kevin to just steer it back on course, and he made like a oh god situation hilarious. Like he would just have the right joke, or or he'd throw the car at the wall, whatever it was. That was, again, that's like, to watch a professional like that in his element is just, that's awesome. I don't care what level it is, it could be huge network TV or whatever, but like just to sit there and watch somebody who could take any meltdown and turn it into a funny thing or make it work. It's just, that was really one of the cooler things about working there. That, and like having guys on the set, like the camera guys that I work with, like Rob and Jose were the 2 main camera guys. And we were allowed to be in on the joke. There were times when we'd pull our shirts up and have our bellies out, just to mess with the hosts. And you can't see that on TV, but like that element of the show, I loved. Like there, like I said, there was no rules, and you weren't made to feel like camera guy A, or go stand in the corner and shut up. Like they wanted you to laugh, they wanted you to play along, they wanted as much as they could get out of you as possible. And again, that you just don't see that, because everybody's so afraid to make decisions now on shows, or they're like, we don't want to offend or whatever. And again, speaking of offending, I think half the skits they did you couldn't do anymore. But that's just a product of the times. But that feeling of like being kind of part of a family. And I felt like the guy that was invited in late, because I did come in late. And those guys were the ones who, were there from the beginning. But they never made you feel like the new guy. I think I was called the new guy a few times, but it was in jest. And it was a good environment to work in.
You brought up some of the segments you couldn't do today. And that's, in going through a lot of the footage for the documentary, I'm just finding like, oh my God, like, and I'm not just like, I'm looking at stuff that I said where I'm like, holy crap, if I just took what I said on a television show live and put it on Twitter, I would be canceled. Like it really was. I mean, it was disconcerting for me to kind of go through this footage and go, oh my God, like, wow, the times have changed. And I'm not talking about, I'm just thinking, there was sort of a looseness to the environment. I think a lot of that came from Kevin, that you felt free to be able to kind of just say something off the top of your head, because he was doing jokes that were so fast that it was just really, I mean, I always appreciated that. It was just always hard for me to keep up. But as you remember your memory of the show, like, what do you think like about like, yeah, a lot of the stuff you can't do today. It's like a very different environment where we're kind of like, maybe we care a little too much about what people say on social media, and social media was the Wild West back in the days. I mean, God, I don't think I even got on to Twitter until like 2009. I mean, Twitter was created in 2007. I got on there in 2009. I remember like stupid shit that I said. I never anything that would like be just, not the traditional things, not the traditional things that get people canceled, but like things are just like, maybe I shouldn't have, I didn't make any incest jokes or racist humor, but like that, like I'm sure I said something that was inappropriate in some form. But what do you think about that idea that like, in such a brief period of time, we've gone from like this freedom of attack of the show and what you could do on that, canceled in, 2012, to now a decade later, and it's a completely different landscape. I just wonder if you have any perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could have, a women of the web type thing anymore. And even In Your Pants gets a little, weird. But like, I think, again, having worked with somebody like Joan Rivers, who just doesn't apologize for the humor, that was kind of the environment on Attack of the Show. Like you have to have that kind of mentality that it's just humor. Like, and this is, or, whatever it is, but this is what we are. And they were good at that. And so how do you criticize somebody who's saying, no, this is exactly what we are? They're not apologizing for it. It doesn't make it right all the time, but it's just something about when you kind of accept what you're putting out there and back it, that people just go, that's what they do. That's who they are. And if you get caught up in the apology game, then it gives power to other people who just, maybe want a voice, I guess. And I'm not saying that like, that's wrong, but it's just this climate is so tough now with, if anybody wants to judge, they can judge. You mentioned Twitter. Everybody's got a voice, which is good, but I feel like people just want to get offended now. And it's easy to just try to find the tiniest little flaws and exploit it. And I think back in the day, you had hosts that just didn't care. They were like, okay, yeah, that's what we do. What are you going to do about it? You either watch or don't watch. And I wonder if you did that show the way it was done then, today, if there would be a big difference in that kind of, especially with how big social media has gotten.
Well, I hope they do. I mean, what I'm hoping is lightning strikes twice, and Attack of the Show is basically just a new generation, like Star Trek: The Next Generation was, different from the original series, still had this sort of core values of it, but it was very different than the original Star Trek series. I'm hoping with the new people they brought into the fray, that whoever the young Chris Gore is, that he's funny enough to put whatever.
As long as he has the good hair.
Exactly. I will just give advice on hair. Movie opinions are very diverse, and I always respect that. I love that conversation. I love disagreeing with people about movies. It's my favorite thing to do. Now we disagree about things with people, and we don't want to be friends with them. I don't understand that attitude. But what do you think? Like, have you seen what's the legacy of Attack of the Show? If you had to sort of put that in like a synopsis, like what is the legacy? I mean, the show ran from 2005 through 2012. It was an evolution of, in a way, X-Play was a huge influence because Adam and Morgan were on Attack of the Show. And a part of that. And it was like this G4 family, and like, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of G4 in 2022. Like, what do you feel the legacy is of G4 and Attack of the Show, if you had to put that into perspective for someone that may have never heard of it, or for your TV scholars or even fans? Like, what are we left with now, the legacy of what the show was?
That's a deep question. I feel like a show like that, if you came up on a show like that, or you learned your craft on a show like that, it could only help you in your future career. Again, you don't see shows that are run by the writers and the producers and things where they really guide the ship. And that's just such a rarity now, because there's so many outside influences, whether it's commercial or, whatever. It's just that kind of show was groundbreaking in its originality, in the way it was run, the way it was handled. And I think the influence would be on anybody who came up through that system to wherever they are now, whether they're writers or producers, that it's hard to say without having a list of the shows that those people have moved on to. But I would hope that if you wanted to learn how to make a show similar to that or better, that you would watch those and see the way they put them together, because it's almost like a roadmap. You just don't see that in entertainment anymore.
I think that's well said. Let's talk about the cancellation of the show and how it was canceled and what the feeling was. I mean, and I don't remember. It was just such a blur. That was a horrible year for me, 2012. It was, I mean, personally, I went through a terrible breakup. I lost my father. He passed away. I was there in hospice with him. It was just like 22. And then, so I lose my girlfriend, my father, and the show I'd spent almost 8 years on. And it was kind of this, it was just awful. So just with the show ending and everything else was happening to me personally, it was like this, gut punch of everything all at once. What was your experience of the end? And when you spoke to people around, how did you hear about the cancellation? I mean, there were always rumors in the last year or so. I think it was like really after Olivia left, it was like, I think the show was kind of on the bubble, because it really just wasn't the same show after her departure. But tell me about all those feelings, what led up, how you found out about the cancellation, the feeling on the set, and maybe some memories of shows you did leading up to the end.
Yeah, I feel like when the main hosts leave, when Kevin and Olivia leave, and I think it was like Chris Hardwick and Candace Bailey, and I'm trying to remember who, I think those were the two co-hosts at the time. But, people would fill in, and it just didn't carry that same kind of weight. Like, they just didn't have the same humor as those two, or they didn't have the same chemistry, and you could feel the difference. I mean, it just is what it is. And so as that time went on, you were like, all right, if this doesn't improve, or if they don't find like a good replacement, it probably isn't going to last, which sucks, because you want it to. But then, we started to hear about, I think it was a Style Network had a choice between the Style Network and G4, and I think they went with the Style Network, and that didn't last very long. But it was weird, because it was like, look, even with G4 in a rebuilding kind of stage, it's still the most interesting type of show for that category. Clip shows and video game reviews and movie reviews, and the interviews they got were phenomenal. The segments they put together were fantastic. So you didn't want that to go away. You just wanted them to find the next Kevin and Olivia. And I think because they couldn't, it just made it easier to make the decision to end the show, which did suck, because it was a lot of fun to work on. No matter who hosted it, we had fun no matter what in the background. There were times when the stage manager would yell at the host, like, in a grandfatherly way, but it was funny, and they'd yell back at him. And so that kind of stuff you just don't see anymore. but yeah, to find out the show got canceled, it was a gut punch, and I'm not like, I was just a fill-in. So I wasn't the main guys who I kind of felt bad for because they were there every day. And then they had to go work in news, which is literally a 180 from that. But yeah, you always hoped it would come back. And then seeing it's coming back. By the way, I cannot believe that it's been almost 10 years since that show's been off the air. Like, how is it 10 years? It felt like we just worked there a couple of years ago.
It's weird. But here we are. Oh my God. But can you tell me also about, like, what was it like to work with the guys in the booth? I'm, interviewing Genji Keen and Alan Wu. I don't know if you had an opportunity to work with either of those directors. Pretty sure you probably did, because I think each of them directed north of 500 episodes each. But can you talk about what it was like to work in the booth and just some of the, I would always pick up some of the chatter, and on rare occasion would have to go in the booth to say hi to Vinny or something, one of the producers, just to, and you'd see, like, it was just very intense environment. It's like being on the bridge of the Enterprise, because it's dark and there's all these, controls. Everybody's got headsets on and it's like an intense atmosphere. But what was it like to work with those directors and take your cues on stage?
I started with Genji, and we're still friends to this day. Big metalhead, by the way. But it was one of those things where he had the respect of the crew like no other director on that show. He always looked out for them with everything. And as a crew member, that you appreciate that stuff. Not that Alan didn't, but Genji did it first. And he had a great relationship with the hosts and everything. I don't really know the story about what went south with him and why he was replaced with Alan. But I also knew Alan from TV Guide days, so it was an easy transition. It was nice that he would always call me first to be, the handheld or fill-in. So I had a good relationship with both directors. But, like, you should have seen our rundowns for a show. I mean, it was like pages and pages. You had to take notes on it because there were so many moving parts on those shows. You were constantly going between segments and, live voiceovers and phoners and interviews, and the set changes. The set was tiny. So to change a set around, to bring in chairs, to bring out chairs, to bring in desks, plug it all in, make sure it lit up, that the audio was there, that it was so difficult that if you didn't have a good director, or if you didn't have respect for the director, it would have just fallen apart, because you had to have that kind of leadership. And Genji started that off for me. You wanted to work for the guy. You wanted to get everything done for him. And that's one of the things that I've learned in the entertainment world. If you respect your director, like, you can do miracles on TV. But if you don't, it will fall apart quickly.
Well, I can't wait to talk to Genji. We have a funny story of something that happened to us at San Diego Comic-Con, where there was an altercation, and he was sucker punched by just some idiot in Old Town, in San Diego, the gas lamp in San Diego. Yeah. And Kevin and I went after the guy. It was weird. Like, it was just the weirdest thing to just see, like, what? Like,
and Genji's not small. He's like,
yeah,
he's a big dude.
I thought it was such a weird thing. Like, what the, so yeah, I'm talking to him.
I remember going to Vegas. I think I went twice to Vegas. I never got to do Comic-Con with Attack because they kept the crew limited. They didn't bring the handheld. But, like, I'd see the pictures from the guys that went, and it was insane. Like, you couldn't go on your lunch break more than to the bathroom because it was such an insane asylum. There were so many people around the set, and you couldn't. I always wanted to do just one, but I did get to go on a Sunday with one of the passes from one of the guys who left early and just see it. But it's not the same as working it, getting paid to be there. But the CES stuff in Vegas, there's stories where I remember going out, doing karaoke, having beers with everybody, and then, like, hoping everybody made it to the set at 7 a.m. for the call time. And maybe one time that didn't happen, but So it was always an adventure. Like, it was fun, and one year at CES, my Florida Gators were playing Oklahoma in the college football final. And Olivia is an Oklahoma fan. And so we were giving each other crap the whole weekend because why not? It just made it fun. And then Florida ended up beating Oklahoma. And but she was cool about it. I remember she covered my Gator logo up with her hands, get away from me kind of thing. But that kind of stuff just, that was cool. That was the road was a fun place to be. And again, to see the fans come out and with the fans would interact, and they were so happy to be there. You know what will never come back is booth babes. You'll never see those people again, but it is what it is.
I think maybe just even as a thing, the concept of a booth babe is something. Now, I remember that you would go to E3 or CES, whatever, and there would be very scantily clad women, mostly with cleavage out in some form. They were often described themselves, I remember, as models. They were models. And so, and it was just really just to get you to go to the booth, right? Oh, I'm going to go to the booth and I'm going to get this temporary tattoo from Microsoft or whatever it was. It was always something dumb. I can't tell you how many times I've come back from one of those conventions with a bag full of stuff. Why did I care so much about getting it when I was there? And now I just want to throw it away because it's all garbage.
There's a gorgeous girl in a schoolgirl outfit was like, do you want a keychain and a picture? Yes.
Yeah.
I think they still exist in the world. It's just, I don't think they would be tied to the TV show like they were.
Yeah. I think, look, we're going through some things that I think are very good and, been a long time coming. And I think there may have been some overcorrection where, I think we do have an appreciation for sexy bodies, whether male or female or whatever your persuasion, that's not a terrible thing. Celebrate.
They still use it in advertising today, and it's it is funny though, the kind of the dual world of that where it's just the way you market something, the way you sell it. It's you trying to tell me that sex doesn't sell anymore, but you got to do it the right way, which, I agree with, nobody should ever do anything against their will or be forced to, be a model for whatever it is somebody's trying to sell, unless they, approve it. But again, I don't think you'll see that.
Well,
really.
No, I think that I miss those old Carl's Jr. commercials. They were very. Do you remember those? The digital ketchup and whatnot. But no, look, I've often said, and especially if you're a religious person, God made boobs, and if there's one thing I know about boobs is everybody loves boobs. Men love breasts. I think women check out other women's breasts, and gay men even look at breasts. It's a thing that's made by God. And if you are a religious person that he made these meatsicles that were stuck in temporarily for however long we're on this mortal coil. And so here we are. None of this stuff that we're talking about, none of this is going to be in the doc, by the way.
Oh, I'm shocked.
This is just you and I BSing and lamenting some of the times we live in, which is kind of when you reflect and kind of look, and it's you look at what Attack of the Show was, it definitely is a marker for how culture has changed for sure. Do you have any perspective on nerd culture and how nerd culture has evolved or changed over the last decade? Have things gotten better? Because my recollection is when Attack of the Show started, nerds were nerds, still to be mocked and made fun of. And why are you an adult that has action figures? Or what are you doing with all those boxes of comic books? But in the evolution of Attack of the Show, and as it progressed and got, toward the end, it's oh my God, the superhero movies are the top movies, These are the biggest films. These are the things that we all, normal people like superhero movies now, which gets them interested in comics. And Comic-Con wasn't the same thing it was in 2005. And it definitely evolved into something, a very different animal come 2012. It was just a different beast. Any perspective about nerd culture and that evolution and how things changed?
I mean, you could argue that Olivia Munn was the gateway to making nerd stuff cool, because it was like, wait, this pretty girl likes comics and toys and video games, like what? And that mindset makes, the guys go, oh, I gotta look at this twice, because if she likes it, and then having Kevin, who was affable and had a great personality and could bring you into that world. And, he didn't really look like your quintessential nerd or geek. So you could say, oh yeah, this stuff's pretty cool. But that, I feel like that type of show, that mentality really opened the door for people to kind of peek in and see, oh, this isn't so bad. Like, it's not just, the guys from Revenge of the Nerds or something like that. Good looking people or whoever like this stuff too. It's not just this niche group of people. That's the feeling I took from Attack, was that it was kind of the doorway into that whole world. I can't think of any other show or property that really kind of brought like a bigger audience into that world.
What, well, first of all, very well said about that. I would say, yeah, it really sort of tracked the rise of nerd culture, and now it's dominated, and maybe we're fighting maybe a little bit too much amongst ourselves. That's
it's the line from The Crow, or the idea has become the institution. Like, it's just the nerd culture was kind of the, bastard stepchild at first. And then now that it's profitable and, everybody's in super sexy costumes and, the effects are over the top. It's like, oh yeah, well, I've always been a fan of this, or this has always been cool. And it's like, no, like comic books. I grew up reading comic books. I didn't really like reading in general, like books, but comics I could gravitate to because they had pictures and they had stories. But these were things that, like, and I was an athlete. I played hockey, so I wasn't like your nerd type guy, but I liked comics because it made me read. It made me interested in reading, but it also got me into the world of like black and white issues and meaning like Peter Parker, what he would go through as Spider-Man. It's never like a black and white issue. It's gray. How do you overcome evil without being the bad guy? And, great power comes great responsibility, whatever lesson you want to learn. Comics was a way for me to really understand what is right, what is wrong, and sometimes how they cross over and what do you do? So I've always kind of liked that genre, but I knew friends who were like, comics, like, what the hell is that? Like, what are you, 2 years old, and it's like they couldn't even make a good comic movie back in the day, so I think people looked at it and were like, oh, Michael Keaton Batman, like, whatever, or Thomas Jane Punisher, like, really, that's what you got? But as it became cooler and you got better writers, better directors, better everything, like, they saw dollar signs, and now it's the coolest thing in the world. Avengers has their own wing now at Disney World or Disneyland. And it's like, so yeah, there's money into it, but everybody's claiming it now where they didn't 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So again, that kind of, I would say a show like Attack of the Show was a gateway into that world for a lot of people, where they could go, oh yeah, there's this, these good looking hosts. I'll check this out. And then maybe you like a little thing here or there. And you're one of those hosts.
Well, I'm definitely one of the nerds, for sure. But yeah, I feel like you don't have to. We live at a time now, and maybe it's not as appreciated by the kids today. But you don't have to hide your geekdom at all. Like, you don't have to hide it. And it used to be that it was something that you would hide and have some sort of shame over. Like, I have 6 long boxes of comics, like, it's not something you don't have to hide it. You don't have to hide it now. What, tell me, and for a last question, is there anything that I didn't mention, anything you'd like to do, like put in perspective your experience, or anything I failed to ask that you feel is important to let people know about your experience on Attack of the Show and G4?
The great summation. I would just say that my time with Attack of the Show was always positive. It was always fun. There was never any pressure. I got to do and see some really cool things. I got to experience great interviews and kind of be behind the scenes for when the actor or actress would come in. I kind of wished we had like behind the scenes cameras back in the day, so you could add it to the documentary or whatever, so people could really see how much fun it was to work on that set. And like I said, the crew getting along, working well with the writers and the directors and everybody getting along. It's so rare because everybody wants to be the big and powerful person now. And that dynamic has changed a lot of TV shows into almost machine-like, and it's not the same. And that's what I loved about working on Attack of the Show, is that it just felt like fun. I was getting paid to go have fun. I'd meet people in the street and tell them I worked on the show, and they're like, dude, I love that show. And I'm like, yeah, they pay me to be there. So that's what I hold from it. Like, again, it's just one of those few things in your life where it's just a great time from beginning to end. You didn't want it to end, but when it does, you understand, that not everything can be this much fun or this great. So I'll always have good memories from it. And, it'd be fun to work on the new show, even just once, just to kind of get back into that world. But, let's let the new guys come up, let the new camera guys have those experiences and everything. So, I don't want to be greedy, but it was fun to be part of that. And I'm always glad that even as a fill-in, I got, to be in that world.
John Gardner, thank you so much for allowing me to do this interview. This was awesome.
I am very hard to nail down.
I'm glad that you agreed. I know you were a little reticent, but I think you'll see this is a celebration of the show, and the story is going to be told in a unique way that'll bring back all those memories. Thanks again.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember. Like, there was one time where I asked Olivia if I could get a picture of me holding her up, and she was totally cool with it. And then I was like, well, I got to get Kevin too if I got Olivia, and he was totally cool with it. But it was weird. It was just, I was like, can I just take a picture with you holding you up? And he was like, yeah. So like, I'll send you those pictures. But it was like, that was like the world. That was the world on that show. It was fun. It was a good, relaxed attitude, and you miss it.
And if you want, you can also hold me. You can hold me.
The hat trick.
Get that photo. It'll be 10 years too late, but we'll get that photo.
I like it.
Awesome.